Ladies and gents, welcome to the Hardened Edge Podcast with me, Dean Ash. Today I've got a guest who's done many things. A U.S. Marine combat veteran, 4 tours Iraq, former special operations operator, law enforcement, prison warden, you name it. Seth Ryan. Seth, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time and coming on my podcast. I know we've struggled to get it on, but today the day has arrived. Thank you.
Absolutely. Just to clarify real quick, so Marine Corps, I joined in 1999 before there was a war on terror. I actually did 2.5 years as an infantry heavy weapons specialist in the Marine Corps, but I was in the reserves because there was no war. And then for us Americans growing up in the 80s, there was never going to be a war. Nobody could compete with America was our thought process growing up, right? And then September 11th happened and changed my life's trajectory. I actually quit my job the next day because I was an EMT working on getting my paramedic. I wanted to be a firefighter ever since I was a little kid. And when I re-enlisted, nobody wants to leave the Marine Corps, let's be honest. When you go in something that hard and you've been through something that rough, but I had to because my unit wasn't going to be deploying anytime soon. And I ended up finding out years later, running into one of the guys that I had served with, and they ended up going to Africa and sitting in a base and doing nothing but gate guard duty for a year straight. So I ended up doing the wise thing by switching over to Army Special Operations, the 75th Ranger Regiment. And it is an animal all to itself, and it's one of the few units that does not have a reserve component. You can't be a reserve ranger. You're either all in or all out.
Okay.
So that's where I did my 4 tours overseas, and like I say, been getting to do a lot of things there, but I want to get out and go law enforcement, and that's where I ended up doing civilian law enforcement, working in federal prisons, and finally a private military contractor in Baghdad.
So, Seth, today's podcast, we're going to be discussing human and sex trafficking. And relevant, you coming from Tampa, Florida, and we know that Tampa, Florida, and New York are 2 of America's major hub points for human and sex trafficking. And Seth, that's sad because most people think that sex trafficking only happens in the third world countries. I know in South Africa it's extremely rife. I've chatted to you, I mentioned my girlfriend was kidnapped. She's been missing 20 odd years, never been found. But this is a problem globally and not just in third world countries, correct?
Absolutely. And I think that's the reason why it's one of the misconceptions is because in America, we see I don't know how much you see of this, but in America right now, if you go on any streaming service, especially Netflix, Prime, all those, they have so many streaming shows and YouTube of true crime. And it's exploded, right? All these channels instantly get millions of subscribers if they have true crime because we're getting so good at forensics, because we're finding people so easily compared to what it used to be. But third world country. Now, South Africa, do they have cameras on every corner? Every house have a Ring camera? Do they have sophisticated, right, tools to be able to find people? Do they have the time, the personnel to do that? They don't. So the reality is it's just simple. It's like we're going back in time 80 years from America when back in the old day, either you killed somebody, you kidnapped somebody, you did something horrible to somebody, either they saw you or they didn't. And that's why people were allowed or able to get away with serial killings and all these horrible things for so long because there just weren't the technology in place and there wasn't the law enforcement component capable of catching and dialing in on people like they are today. So we just assume it must be only there. But in Tampa, Florida, specifically St. Petersburg, too, is kind of one of the big hubs for coming into the U.S. And it's very unfortunate. And unfortunately, we actually have a huge amount of that coming from our own selves. So we're trafficking our own people. We're not even needing anymore to rely on outside third world countries, South America, coming from Africa, to come here, bring people, instead we're trafficking.
Seth, you've gone a bit silent there, just quickly. I don't know.
Oh, I'm
Just gone a bit quiet there.
Can you hear me now? Uh-oh. Something going wrong?
I can hear you, but it sounds faint. I'm not sure why. My volume's up.
Okay.
The sound was perfect, just gone soft.
Let me disconnect and reconnect my mic here. Let me see. Is that better?
It's getting better.
Any better?
That is getting better.
That is wild. I don't know.
Oh, there we go. You're back. You're back.
I'm back. Okay, dang it. Well, what was the last thing you heard me say? Sorry about that.
No, we were saying about the advanced technologies we have. Oh my God, I lost that last track.
Yeah. So we're right. We don't have the technology in the third world countries that we have in America, and we're so used to in America having that capability that if you're going to murder somebody, you're going to kidnap somebody, you're going to do horrible things to them. That we have the time, resources, and technology to currently catch people in America that you don't have in the third world country. It's almost like you're stepping into a time machine and going back. Long story I won't get into, but my father was actually raised in Paraguay from the age of, I think, 5th grade is when his dad pulled him out of school until he was 16 or 17. In high school, they moved back to America. And that whole time, he literally rode on a horse, carried a 6-shooter, and it was literally the Wild West is what his whole childhood was like. And he said, it's just literally like I stepped into a time capsule and went backwards, 80, 100 years. And that's how everybody lives over there. You're just drinking yerba mate tea and, and having gunfights like wild saloons and all kinds of crazy stuff. So that's really the difference is the technology, the resources, the ability to catch people here. And people assume that it must be like that in other places outside of the American bubble, but it's not. And so if you don't get, eyewitness seen, people are going to be able to get away with a lot more horrific things.
Seth, before we get on to the questions, I know recently you were on the Urban Valor YouTube channel in LA. You just come back from LA, which is, to be a guest on there is pretty special.
Yeah.
I know that you were also on the, you were chatting to somebody that was involved. Was it on the 75th Ranger Regiment channel?
Yeah, 75th Ranger Regiment. The name of it is called Legends of the 75th. It's a big YouTube channel as well as podcasts. And he actually, I found out because I'd known him for a little while that he was on the Jessica Lynch rescue raid with me. But I was the primary, like my unit was the Bravo Company 175 1st Battalion was the primary element that went literally in to get Jessica into the hospital and did the digging of the bodies. And he was 2nd Battalion, and I knew he was there because Pat Tillman was 2nd Battalion, and I saw him for the first and only time that I ran into him on that mission, but I didn't know where they were. I didn't know what they did. And keep in mind, Nasiriyah was this massive city that had never been taken, and the Marines actually got kicked out. Like they were going to go try to take it, and they got met with so much resistance during the invasion. They made the call, let's just stop people right here. Let's put some guards so we know if they come out toward us, but we're just going to keep pushing on. And that's what the environment was. But nobody's ever told that story. Everything that you hear right now on YouTube is just regurgitated facts that they found on ChatGPT and Google. This is the first opportunity of 2 people who were actually there, who are now podcasters, and we're not worried about keeping our clearance, that are telling that full true story. And that's going to be coming out in the next, it'll be coming out 3 weeks from now on my podcast channel.
So Seth, I know we're going slightly off topic, but just for those people that don't know, that story was famous globally. For the Jessica Lynch story, I know she was kidnapped. I know we're going slightly off topic, but because it's such an interesting thing to be a part of, can you just tell those who don't know what exactly happened there in a brief?
Yep, absolutely. So the highlights are the 507th unit that she was with actually got cut off. Essentially, they just drove away from these big tanker trucks that had all the fuel, and they just left them. And so they were getting lost trying to figure out what turns to take. You'd think Iraq only has one highway. How do you miss that? Well, they did. And so they ended up missing it, and they ended up getting into a wreck. And when they got into a wreck, several people got injured, and they had taken rocket-propelled grenade fire. And so she gets pulled out amongst the chaos. Some people died on the scene. Some were taken with her. Ultimately, the only person we recovered that was alive was Jessica, and that happened 9 days later, and it was my very first combat mission in Special Operations. Everybody talks about, you can play video games. If you've ever heard of Call of Duty, on Xbox, then you know what unit I was a part of. So Task Force 141 was the unit that I was in, and we changed that number all the time. So it's funny they zeroed in on just one of the numbers, but that was it. It was a task force of the elite put together for our different skill sets, and ours was we're going to go in and eradicate any resistance. The SEAL Team 6 was dropped on the rooftop. I can still remember them landing on the roof, and now they're going to take over the hospital from the top down. We blow a hole in the side of the big, huge wall, 8-foot wall that they had around the hospital, and they had a military barracks built all the way around the hospital. It's very different from America or, a standardized country. And then we go into the hospital and work our way up. They'd already found her, the SEALs and the PJ that were with them. So it was the reason why it was such a huge thing is we hadn't had a POW rescue mission since World War II that was, everybody knew about, right? And it was a very big deal that to this day, the people that I served with that have died, passed away, Command Sergeant Major Barreras, Martin Gunny Barreras, he passed away, and he's as high a level as you can get in the United States military. He's done so many amazing things his whole life. He dies in a firefight, which he should have, as an E9, as a highest level command sergeant major, he should never be around gunfire, right? He should be protected. He's the one who's running everything. He ends up in a firefight because that's the kind of guy he was. And the main thing is, in the newspaper, in every article, the headline is, member of the Jessica Lynch raid rescue mission passes away. Even everything he's done his whole career, the one thing he's remembered for that everybody will immediately recognize was being a part of that mission. And that's why I just wanted to share the true life account of what happened. And there's so many lies that are out there and just people guessing and making up stupid things. I just wanted to correct all that.
Yes, Seth, we will definitely have a podcast on that and many other things you can discuss.
Yeah.
But Seth, onto the questions. I mean, can you paint a picture of like modern day human trafficking? What does it look like in the century of 2025? I mean, most people think it's associated with kidnappings. But what is the truth in that?
So there is truth in that. However, because of, again, as I discussed at the very beginning, the amount of technology that we have and the ability to find these people, it's so much more prevalent here, especially in Tampa, Florida. We got hundreds of millions of dollars in law enforcement alone just in our city. So they have to be very tricky when they're getting people in here and then moving them out. Now, I'll give you direct instances, and that's why I think this podcast is going to be very special because I've been in this space. I mentioned that I was the ambassador's bodyguard. I was on the ambassador protection detail in Iraq from 2019. When we got attacked, they burned our gates to the ground. We all thought we were getting our heads cut off. And instead, Trump brought in some Rangers, SEALs, Delta guys, and they end up nabbing some guys and getting the intel of when the main Iranian guy was going to come in and kill us all, and dropped the Ginzu bomb on him and killed him. That's the only reason I'm alive today. So that was a very harrowing experience. And then I lived through all of COVID, locked down in the embassy, not allowed back in America because I'm in the Middle East. So all that time and all those things that I went through, what happened, I came out of that. I had been recruiting for the team. Triple Canopy is the name of the company. Blackwater and Triple Canopy are the two big companies that have existed since the very beginning. And I worked for Triple Canopy, and they had hired me to be the recruiter to actually recruit guys to go to Baghdad and Kabul when America still had Kabul before that absolute debacle. And so I literally recruited my own team. So I went over there and worked with guys that I personally recruited. What happened is I got back from to America, and then I applied and ended up getting hired as a recruiter for Quiet Professionals. It's a retired Delta Force Sergeant Major and a phenomenal human being that I'd love to try to get on my podcast, and if I can, then I'll try to push him your way, because Andy Wilson is a absolute phenom human being, period. He absolutely did not want me to do any shady tactics that everybody else uses and is standard in the industry. But the main thing that I point all that out for is because he recognized the need, and he saw that there were no hunters hunting the human traffickers that are out there, and yet he found these two savants who can literally look at a computer screen, and it's more like the movie Limitless. Like, they see things that nobody else can see. And a testament to that is we had the head of federal law enforcement come to our office for the state of Florida, and we're looking at some of the cases we had built. These two savants had built based on open source intelligence they were able to find online. And if you don't know, all these human trafficking victims are being trafficked primarily online, and they're being used on Facebook with just Facebook posts. But what you don't know is there's a hidden code, a totally different language that's primarily made up of emojis. And so, look, everybody knows what the eggplant emoji is. Everybody knows what the peach emoji is, right? That's where it pretty much stops for most people. They have no idea what the little rabbit means. They have no idea what the eyes looking to the side mean. They have no idea what the little water drops. All those things are coded language that they use to tell you what type, literally what, not only that they have a pimp, that they have somebody who is trafficking them, but what type of he literally has a management style, and it's built around and showcased on the emojis. And so you know what you're walking into if you want to go and have an intimate relationship with this girl. Obviously there are boys too, and that is a real thing. But the sad thing is so many of them are underage. The primary way that these underage people are being brought into this life is from two avenues. Number one, runaways. If your child runs away from home, the chances that they're going to be trafficked are astronomical in Tampa, Florida. That's also astronomical in any other major city where there's a lot of people. But specifically, we had a case when I was working for Quiet Professionals where I can show you I'll have to send you the pictures because I'm taking photographs of the people taking photographs of the Attorney General and multiple sheriffs because I was at the press conference. We actually our hunters were the ones who found the whole network of where this one runaway girl had been trafficked. And she was gone from her home for 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, she had been trafficked by, I think it was like over 14 people had relations with this girl. And I think she was 15 when she was being groomed and was first being assaulted by the pool boy, who was like a 55-year-old man, by the way. And then from there, she ran away and texted him. Well, he didn't respond to her call, so some guy driving down the street asks her if she wants a ride. She gets in, and of course he's like, well, I'm not letting you out unless you pay me back for the ride. And that's where it started. And she getting dropped off at gas stations. And then some guy walks up and starts up a conversation with her. Next thing you know, he hooks her up after he does his deed with her. Then he hooks her up with another guy. And ultimately she just goes to a hotel and gets trafficked by all these people. Then, and this is 2 weeks, again, your child ran away from home because they got angry at you. Now she's in a strip club where they know she's underage. And they trafficked her anyways, and they sent her back to the champagne room, knowing exactly what was going to happen. And they just stood by and guarded, her while she's being assaulted and trafficked. And again, it's a kid who thinks that she's doing adult things. She's having sex. No, you're not. You're being trafficked. And the horrific thing is, once she gets pulled out of that, and a counselor sits down and talks with her eye to eye, she realizes she's been put on drugs to numb the pain. She's been, every one of them were putting her on heavy doses of drugs, and then they were selling her to other people. But she didn't see that. She thought, she's living this glamorous life, and maybe someday she's going to be, this or be that. And now you have OnlyFans. You have all these ways where you can sell, yourself and your soul, unfortunately, online. And so many kids today, because of the prevalence of the people that are, I would say, the girls that are glamorized, that are in those positions, right? The girl who's very famous, who just had sex with 100 men in one day, right? And now there was 12 hours, and now she's wanting to do 1,000 men. Listen, that little girls are seeing that. They don't have fathers, or they don't have their biological fathers, which is almost the same thing in far too many circumstances. To the fathers that are the stepfathers, who are really good, solid men who raise kids, You guys are human gold walking. I have two cousins, and both of them, they were basically raised by older brothers. Both of them married women who had children from deadbeats, dirtbag husbands who never wanted anything to do with their kids. And they raised those kids, and that is the single most important factor in kids not deciding to run away and go seek out other people's approval, specifically men's, and to not be trafficked. At the same time, you sent me an article, and I definitely want you to include that, or at least, maybe like a transcript of the words that lady shares, if nothing else. But that clip that you sent me is exactly what we're talking about right now. This girl decides to run away from mom, and she is going to go meet up with boyfriend, who, oh, by the way, happens to be across the Mexico border, and she's in Arizona. And she gets all the way to the Mexican border. Luckily, she had her cell phone, and they were able to ping her cell phone. 15 minutes, she would have been gone forever. And the Border Patrol was able to snag her before she got to the actual border and crossed. And 3 men, very old men, right, grown-up men, show up in a pickup truck to pick her up. And the license plate was run by the Border Patrol, and it was already had been flagged as a cartel-owned truck. They already knew human trafficking was happening by these people. And what happens when she walks across that border and this one guy comes over to meet her? Well, that's not the guy that I've been talking to online. And the mom says that they use AI, and my interpretation of that, and I want to get your opinion on that. To me, what that means is they're using AI for photos of what this boy looks like, or they're using ChatGPT to probably translate language and be able to send her and make this more loving, make this more affectionate in language, and ChatGPT will give you exactly what you're looking for. And so you could easily catfish somebody for months or even years into believing that you're a true life person who you say you are.
I mean, Seth, we are so sophisticated with technology these days, which is great. But like you say, AI and that, people are creating fake, false profiles. You can make somebody look as good as they want. And then again, with the language, you can talk as eloquently as you please, etc. Seth, just coming back, for those people that don't know, the different types of emojis you mentioned, like the rabbit, do you know the meaning? Can you share those meanings with us? Because for the people, if they see their kids using those or they see it popping up on their kids' pages, maybe they can be...
I would say be cautious about that because of this, right? Again, I guarantee you I've used the rabbit emoji before, and I didn't mean that to be an underage girl.
Of course.
Right? So a rabbit, so it's a girl who's having sex multiple times a day, right? So she's available all the time. She's going to be very active, and she's young. So the idea of the rabbit was it's like this cute, furry, little, young-looking rabbit. So it's almost like, again, if you just sat down with the emojis and let your mind wander into how depraved could I make this, and that's where these emojis really started to fluctuate. The only downside is, again, everything is fluent, especially when it comes to human trafficking, because we are keying in on these things. Guess what? Now they're going to change it. So that's the only downside is that it's not permanent. It's not forever. But what I remember of taking the course, right, if you put a gorilla, there's the little gorilla emoji, and there's 2 versions of the gorilla. There's one where he's walking sideways, but then there's one of the face. So it literally, I believe she explained, one of the savants who actually put together a whole course to teach this, but for obvious reasons, we can't teach that publicly, right? It's only law enforcement that are allowed to learn, because if they learned this stuff, it would be horrible, and all of it would change instantly. But the gorilla means that it is it's a black man, and he is a gorilla style. So gorilla is a guy who is, just think of over-the-top aggressive. So you're going to come to him, he's going to beat you. That's it. You're going to get beat. It is what it is. And if that's what you're looking for, is somebody that's going to beat you, right? How in the world do you and I rationalize that a child would go, oh yeah, I'd definitely love to get beat? here's the other flip side to that coin, what that means to some of them versus it's one of the hearts, and I honestly can't remember which heart emoji it was, but if there's a heart emoji, and I don't remember if it's the two hearts that circle, but there's a lover. So the lover trafficker, the lover pimp, which we have to get away from saying the word pimp because that's a trafficker. That's somebody who's selling you as a product, keeping the money for himself, and then raping you constantly, and beating you, and selling you to his buddies for nothing. And then they give them gifts. And this is how the lover really differentiates himself. He's still going to beat you, but the lover prefers to have his I can't even say the language, but his top girl, we'll just say the top chick. Okay. And she is the one who actually keeps all the other girls in line. Now, here's the sickest part of what this dynamic is. A human trafficker here in America specifically, especially the lover, every time he interacts with you is typically going to be very loving, very kind. He's going to cuddle you. He's going to be super sweet. He's going to say nice things to you and get you in on an emotional level that you would not want life. You would rather die than to be without him. And he sews that in very, very, very tightly. And it very much is also predicated on the drugs, right? Every time you're with him, he's giving you drugs. So every time you need to feel good, you're physically having to come to him. And he's not letting you use drugs from another source because he's literally implanting things in your brain that you don't even realize. And he's telling you that I know that there's nothing laced in my drugs. You can't go out there where there's fentanyl that could kill you. You come to me when you need to feel good. And he does that. Now, what he does is he sets up a hierarchy of the girls. The girl that he's decided is brutal enough to keep the all other girls in line, and she's motivated to do that. He treats her completely different than the other girls. Now, he will still beat her. He still will, abuse her himself and rape her. But it's very, very rare. And again, his whole business model is I get to be the good guy. She gets to be the bad guy. And the beatings that these girls take from the other chick, a lot of them that have spoken publicly will say even though the woman is less strong than the man and one punch isn't going to do the same, they go way farther. You're more likely to get put in hospitalization from another girl than you are from the other guy because she is punishing you. She's not teaching you a lesson. She's punishing. And she's essentially asserting dominance by doing this to you. And she's not beating you that badly just for you. She's beating you that badly. So every other girl that's seeing your beating is going to do exactly what she says, when she says, how she says, so that they don't end up like this girl. Now, I'll tell you a positive story. In Tampa, Florida, there's a nonprofit organization called Heart Dance. Heart, H-E-A-R-T, Dance, D-A-N-C-E. The woman who I've interviewed her for one of my podcasts, I'm going to bring her back on now that I've launched my new podcast. She has been fighting human trafficking for 40 years. 40 years. It belonged before there was ever a term even thought of as human trafficking. She was a Miami Dolphins NFL cheerleader back in I believe she said in the 70s, right? So very beautiful, but they got to do a lot of charity work, right? That was their main thing. They're out there to promote and be positive. She ends up coming to a place where she interacts with these two kids. They're abused, right? She ends up finding out that I'm gonna mix up the ages, but I believe the little girl was like 7 or 8 and the little boy was like 5 or 6. Both of them had multiple STDs. Both of these children were so horrifically physically abused sexually that I mean it was just beyond description. And she said that when she found out that it was her grandmother that was selling her to all these men, that's what changed her life. When she found out that it was generational. And then they obviously brought in grandma, talked to grandma, arrested grandma. Guess what? Grandma had been trafficked by her mother and by her grandmother. So we're talking about decades and decades of time in which wherever these people are, you can always go over there and have sex with very, very, very small children. And That's the reality of human trafficking in America. Is you've got runaways, and then you got the foster care system. I didn't mention the second. Foster care is huge, because now it's not that you don't have a strong dad, it's that you don't even have family. It's literally you're bouncing from one abuser, which is all too common, to another. And whether the abuse is coming by way of physical, psychological, both, and or sexual, and then mixing that in, I can tell you from my personal family tree. This one's hard. So my mom has an older brother, and my mom's older brother has spent his entire life on drugs and alcohol, whole life. He spent more years inside a prison cell than he has spent outside of a prison cell. That includes his younger life, right, as a child and growing up. He finally died, of course, of a heart attack after, drugs his entire life. But the generational curse that he built is now something that I'm dealing with. Literally yesterday, I had a phone call with my cousin who has to go pick up my cousin's little girl who is in prison at age 22, and she's been in there for several years. She was already in prison before that. This is her second term. She is about to get out of prison, and what do you think she's going to go do? Exactly what she did before, and she's going to end up back in prison, and it's going to continue until she wakes up. But unfortunately, her entire think of your tree. Think of every person that you're related to that you know of, and all the people that you've grown up around. All of them have been in the foster care system, have been sexually abused by many, many, many people. All of them have, from my uncle, he had sex with one woman, and they had 6 kids. Wait, five kids. They had 5 kids. All 5 kids taken by the state. All 5 of those kids then dispersed out. All 5 of those kids then sexually abused by the foster care system and all these different people. And whenever you're getting abused in one house, what do? Move you to another house. Guess what happens there? Exact same thing. So what happened is all those kids now have multiple kids. All of those kids got taken by the state. All of them. So every single one of these kids had multiple kids. The craziest one is my cousin the one that's in prison. Her mom, my direct cousin, she ended up recognizing, she went in and gave birth to another kid who she's on meth, she's on, cocaine, she's doing heroin while she's pregnant with these children. She decides after her boy, man, whatever this guy is, dirtbag, shows up and he reeks of weed and he's completely filthy and disgusting, hasn't showered in forever. They called the police. As soon as they saw him, smelled him, was like, if this is what their life is like, we can't allow this little baby to fall in their hands. The horrific part is, they took that kid. Guess where they give that kid? To people that are going to abuse it. Hopefully not, but if you're looking at stats, if you're looking at reality, if you're looking at every person that comes out of those homes, the percentage is far, far greater than 50% that have experienced abuse in multiple forms from different homes. So now baby's taken. So now she's already learned that her previous babies had been taken by the state because of her being on a bender with drugs. Now she had a new one. She gets to keep this one. Nope. She gives birth and then never sees it again. That baby, then she doesn't even know. So what does she do? What do you think that person would logically do? She has another baby, of course. Why would you not? Here's the crazy part. With this baby, she'd already learned if you go to a hospital, they'll call the police. So she, because she's very smart, went into the woods and gave birth to a child with no birth certificate, no social security number, not a U.S. citizen. So now she has this random child who has no proof of or ability to function in the United States of America, and technically is an alien, is not a U.S. citizen, is an illegal alien in America. That's my family tree. That's the kind of generational curses that are coming just from the foster care system in one vein, and that's just one of them. Like, I have a lot of family, all drug addicts, all alcoholics to some extent. A lot of it weren't the worst drugs, but the point is they became numb and they got addicted to painkillers and pills, and they were just asleep. So when my cousins were both, my two cousins, Jeremy and Nathan, when they were raised, I'm going to have them on my podcast because their stories of what they had to live through and how my 13-year-old cousin had to knock out the boyfriend of her mom, who's an alcoholic, and kept her on drugs and alcohol because he was going to, smack the kids around, and he wasn't putting up with it. Luckily, he was big enough. He knocked him out with one punch. That type of uphill. Think about, for me, I was raised with the two good kids from both of our parents. My dad was the good kid from their family. After rough edges, my mom was the good kid. And so I've had a great childhood, though surrounded by drug addicts and alcoholics. That's why I've never drank alcohol in my whole life. Not as a contractor, not a Marine, not in special ops. A lot of guys hated me the second they found out I didn't drink. A lot of guys couldn't stand me when I'm never going to try drugs. It is what it is. But it made me stick to discipline, and it made me have this awareness of how horrible your life can turn out if you go down that path of addiction and allowing it to be generational and passing that on to your kids. And obviously anything can be taken to an extreme. But if that answers part of your question, Dottie Skipper is her name. And if you look her up, 40 years fighting human trafficking, she changed her life, and for 40 years, she's been going into strip clubs in Tampa, Florida. And that's what I was going to get to is she is now with Heart Dance. She started that. She goes into a strip club in Tampa, Florida, and she walks straight in with baskets of gifts to give the strippers in the back. And the bouncers and the club owners let her in. And the reason they do is because they've already learned she is so well regarded in Tampa, Florida, and so many people know her. If she walks in and they don't let her in, the girls see that. Their girls are always paying attention. The girls will walk out of the club. They will come meet her in the parking lot. You, as a club owner, you don't want that. They want these girls to stay addicted to the life. By the way, the term is the life. If you see the words the life, know that the life is always referring to, when it talks about this right topic, it's always referring to the life of selling your body, selling sex, because they consider that a specific type of life path. So they call it in the life. These strippers, they're in the life. She has given her these baskets of just gifts, things that any girl would want and can use. And with it, she hands them a card, a business card that does really well in all, right, moisture and everything else, right? It's a really good business card. Here's what happened to bring this full circle. Dottie gets a phone call. It's a random girl in a hospital in critical condition. She is finally now out of critical condition. She just lost the baby that she was pregnant by her lover, the lover pimp, the lover trafficker. His baby was in her. Top girl, top chick, beats her, causes miscarriage, and then keeps going and keeps going. And now she's, just disfigured. Looks terrible in this hospital bed. She remembers that she had put Dottie's business card under the insole of her shoe, in her shoe, right? And she pulls that out and makes that phone call finally. And Dottie says, doing this for 40 years, working in this space, and it's so few and far between girls that will on their own just give you a call. It's not until they're in a hospital ICU that they finally are talking to nurses and doctors who are telling you, you don't deserve this. You need to get in touch with one of these organizations who can get you out of this life. And it's not until then, and sadly, in this one girl's instance, where she finally got out of the life. But it wasn't until she lost a baby, and as horrific as it would be to raise the child of an abuser, still, that's so traumatic. And that work that Dottie's doing is what's one of. There's over 20 different organizations that I'm connected with who all do different things with human trafficking victims. It's called the SAFE, SAFE, and it stands for something, but the SAFE Alliance is literally just them bringing 20 plus nonprofit organizations together. One of them is called No More Foundation. One is, and they have, it's hard to find these because so many of the easy names like No More was taken. So it's like No More, I don't know if it's .Florida, but they have to add this one little thing. So I'll make sure and get those links to you so that people don't mistake it. But these organizations do everything from police officer identifies young girl is being trafficked. Where do you send her? Well, you can send her to jail, which is what's always happened because she's on drugs, she's underage, she's doing criminal activities. They always have the girls sell drugs. It doesn't matter if they're a gorilla pimp, if they're a lover, every single one, they don't sell drugs anymore. And this is one of the reasons why they get into it. They realize that they can be drug dealers by proxy. When they do that, they have literally taken away law enforcement's ability to point to them and say, you're the reason why this is happening. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. She just said, she says that. You have absolutely no physical evidence. She has the drugs on her. She's selling it. You caught her. Just because she names me doesn't mean anything. And in America, that's one of the loopholes, unfortunately. So that's one of the reasons why guys get into this, but then they realize that there's so much more money by running these girls, and it's so much more clout. It's so much more of a flex to be a guy who has a harem of girls who call him daddy and literally look at him as their only source of good things in life. And he will go out and buy a knockoff, Louis Vuitton bag, lie to her and tell her that's a Louis. This cost me $4,000 for this little purse. And those girls believe it 100%. And they will fight you if you try to tell her otherwise because they have to believe that that's real. And this dude, paid $10 to some guy and bought 50 of them, at $10 a piece. And he's handing these out to these girls. And they think they're living this great, amazing life. And they have all these great things. But really, it's the drug addiction. And it's the psychological attachment that these traffickers have built and embedded in on purpose through steps that you would normally associate with a cult. Cult leaders have been put under a magnifying glass so often. Netflix, Prime Video, you name it, you can go on and watch how to build a cult. There was actually students, I believe it was from Stanford, Yale, it was a big Ivy League school, that did a whole paper that systematically laid out every single intricate step to the nth degree, and we're talking about, 50, 60 pages or more, exactly how to build a cult. It was so thorough that law enforcement immediately took over and said, this will never be shown. You guys get an A+. But guess what? That is now locked down and will never be shown. If you reproduce this, you're going to be liable legally, because we're telling you right now that is very harmful to put out. It almost like an anarchist cookbook. Anybody in the world could take this and now create this catastrophe for everyone else, because it's every single step and it's literally a follow the step-by-step plan, right? So you see that these guys have been in the life long enough that they've just kind of built that on their own. They figured out what the steps are. And so they've built this empire of these girls. Again, it's everything for him it's a win-win-win. He doesn't see these girls as being trafficked. He sees these girls as his property. He sees these girls as girls that were without and that were homeless and that didn't have anybody. And now, listen, I might have to smack him from time to time. My girl might have to beat on him from time to time. But in the grand scheme of things, they're better off being with me. And they build that in their mind. And these guys are 100% convinced that they're not trafficking humans, that what they're doing is beneficial both for the girl and for them. And really, it's this huge flex that they are just, in old times, they would be a king. They would just be this guy with a harem of girls because they're just that good. And that's the problem, is then when you have somebody that deranged and that delusional, just like a cult leader that you've seen, Jim Jones and everybody else wants you to drink Kool-Aid and commit mass suicide, but it's for the greater good in their mind. What kind of twisted mind thinks that way? There's a lot of them out there.
Seth, what role does corruption in law enforcement and politics play in keeping these victims alive?
The unfortunate side of that, which I've learned more now that I'm out of law enforcement, unfortunately, and I think I just sent you a link to one clip of this where there's such a need. There's so many children that are being abused now that they have to legally pull the kids out of the abused home, but now they don't know where to put them. And unfortunately, they know that there are abusers. They know that there's a house that they've sexually abused children, but they get fined by the government and they lose their job if they do not get these children placed within a certain number of days. They do not get sued by people that are abusing kids. They do not get any repercussions by placing a child in the hands of a pedophile. So they just do it. And they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. And they knowingly do it again and again and again. And these people are just, in their mind, these pedophiles are just living a golden dream. They know that everyone knows the deal, but they're so short-staffed and so few people are willing that that's what they're doing. And so the law enforcement, as a police officer on the street, I'll give you one case where, as a police officer, I caught a guy. I was driving down the street one night. It's 8 o'clock at night. I see a couple of, I'm talking 8, 9, 10-year-old girls walking by themselves. Dark street. It's right down the street from the police department, but police departments aren't typically built right in the nicest areas. It's usually kind of in the middle of the city where it's a little bit older, so rougher houses are around there. So I thought that was odd. I pull up to them and they flag me down as I'm getting close. I was already going to stop, but now they're flagging me down frantically. And they say, hey, that man that just pulled up, he drove by, he stopped and rolled down his window and he showed me his genitalia. He showed me his penis. And I'm like, wait, what? Because I'm just seeing little kids and I'm about to tell them to go home. What are you doing out here? And they tell me this, and it kind of blew my mind. But I see the car and it's maybe 300 yards ahead, but it just made a turn. Now I got to catch him. I said, you kids go straight to that police department. I'm going to go get him. I take off. He luckily was going to pick up his sister at Walmart where she worked, and he pulls into the parking lot. And because he had done that and it was right around the corner, I was able to see the car, identify it, know that was him, pulled in, I arrested him. Get him back to the station. Here's where law enforcement and the laws in America break down. We bring this guy in and he's completely aloof. He thinks this is a game. He's not really that worried because I guess in his mind, he didn't touch them. They didn't touch him. So what proof do you have, right? He wasn't on camera. So what proof? And that's what ended up showing out, because at the end of the day, we brought the girls are there. We had to wait for their parents because these are underage kids, very underage. And we had to have them with parents in the room identify his penis.
Oh my gosh.
What 8 or 9-year-old is going to admit in front of their parents that they know and can identify this man's genitalia? Zero. I'm sure maybe one out of 100. But these kids immediately clammed up. I don't even know what that is. What's that word? I don't, penis. So it's a flaw. But again, right, what else are you going to do? How else can you prove that these little kids not this case, right? What if it's a 17-year-old girl? She wants to get the guy that just broke up with her in trouble. And so she claims, which happens all the time in America, all the time. And that's, there's so many layers to this. The number of fake rape reports that I took was, I'll put it this way. Of the rape reports I took 3.5 years on the street as a police officer, 0% are what you and I would constitute a rape. All of these girls that are that I took reports from were people who said things like this. One girl is in the ER, and a nurse finally gets out of her that she has had sex with a guy, and she says non-consent. As soon as she says that, they have to call law enforcement. We show up. I've got my book here. You're standing in front of police officers now. Do tell me everything that just happened to you. Okay, that's not the best plan. That's not the best scenario, but it is what it is. You know, I can't turn into an old woman, which would be better for her to talk to. I'm the bald guy who's standing here at 6 a.m. At a hospital, and you have to tell me what happened. So I'm taking the information. She's having consensual sex with a man she met at a bar and went home with. And they've been having sex for a minute. And then in her mind, this is the key, in the back of her mind, never spoken, never shared, never in any way conveyed to the man. In the back of her mind, she thought, man, I'd like to stop right now. That, in her college-educated brain, was a sexual assault rape. So now you see why the amount of layers to the catastrophe that we have in America is so thick that to just lay out a simple case of a girl is being forced to have sex with a man is so convoluted, and it's so complicated, because the same thing with the human trafficking victims I described, as I laid out for you, the cult, right? He's building a cult of these girls. There's an organization, and I want to repeat, I'm not saying that I know this organization thoroughly or that I am giving my blessing to, but I know of, and the theory behind it is what I love. The theory behind the name of Skull Games, Skull, Skull Games. They arrested a pimp after they had found a trafficker, after they had after they got these girls, found out he was the one, and blah, blah, blah. They interviewed him. He laughed in their face, and he was very indignant the entire process. He said, you can send me to jail all you blanking want. When I get out, these girls are going to be the ones bailing me out, and they're all coming right back to me because I've been playing skull games with them. And exactly true to his word, that's exactly what happened. When he got out, it was those girls that had been trafficked by him that posted the bail money and were there to pick him up and to get him out. How, right? A victimless crime, that those words are thrown around a lot in the modern day. These girls refuse to press charges. Even though they're being raped and severely beaten, they think that that's what love looks like because that's all they've ever known. And it's better than being homeless and just being attacked by random homeless guys. So this has got to be better. Roof over my head, I get food, and I get these fake Chanel and Louis Vuitton bags. So that's at the heart of it. You've got so many layers of where the kids are coming from, right? And then where they're going into. Another one with the strip clubs. This one was a recent one. This happened, I would say, 6 months ago. Dottie Skipper Heart Dance Foundation. She goes into a strip club, just one of the normal ones she goes to in Tampa. She has spent, I think she said 16, 17 years going into these strip clubs and doing this. This was the second time ever that she was told never to come back to the strip club. She went to a strip club. There's a group of men that go with them, and the men stand outside for obvious reasons. But they are essentially PSD, the physical protection team for these girls. And they become very friendly with the bouncers because, again, bouncers are rubbing shoulders with former retired military colonels. They're rubbing shoulders with spec ops guys, right? So it's not like we're just some nerds. They want to get to know us, and they're trying to get out of this job and try to get to something better, and they're doing protection, so it's very easy for good reason that everything was going smoothly. They're there with the bouncers like them. Dottie actually brought gift baskets with flowers for the girls this time specifically, and she goes in and she noticed over the past 3 times she had been at this strip club, and she didn't tell me the name, and it doesn't matter because she said they're all the same. She went in one time and she noticed all the girls were totally different. There was none of the girls that had worked there before. All those girls were gone. All of these girls were Asian girls. She went in and talked to them. None of them spoke English. She had to get an interpreter. She has to use her phone to try to communicate. Guess what? None of those girls knew what Tampa, Florida was. None of those girls knew where they were at in the United States. Some of them didn't even know they were in the United States. That is a absolute 100% ironclad case of human trafficking. These girls, again, are being sent to the champagne room with random guys, and then she goes into the strip club the next time. It's all girls from Ukraine. She goes in there another time. This time, it's all girls from a totally different South American country, right? Brazilian, Colombian, you name it. But they're all, it's the same MO. It's the same pattern. They're specifically bringing these girls in waves. Now, how would you know if a whole group of attractive girls come into America that they're not just there sightseeing, having a vacation? It's Tampa, Florida. We have Disney World here. We've got Busch Gardens. We have so many worldwide attractions that we're full of groups of tourists. They're going in big groups that don't speak English, barely speak English. So it's not uncommon at all for law enforcement to come across that, and that's completely normal. She goes into this strip club. Everything's going okay. They come outside, but she said that she just felt uneasy. The guy said the same thing. There was just this uneasiness. Everybody's still being nice, but there was just this something in the air was just tense. And again, because of all these girls obviously not being trafficked by just some random guy, it's an organization that's doing this. And then a guy gets shot to death in the parking lot a few feet away. That's when everybody flees the scene, and that's when they're told, hey, it's not safe for you to be here. Please don't come back. And she said in 16, 17 years of doing this, that's the second time that's ever happened to her out of all the time she's been doing this. So it's obvious that the cartel are running every one of those girls. It's obvious that they're bringing them in through Tampa or St. Pete, and through the savants that worked with me at Quiet Professionals. Almost every single case was coming in through St. Pete. They also would come across the bridge to Tampa and frequent the strip clubs in Tampa, but the port of it, the way they're getting in and the main places they're being trafficked, hookah lounges and legal marijuana distribution places are now the ground zero hubs for the type of people who are doing this. So every time, it's not like you're walking in there and you're getting a girl, but that's where the people who own those and work in those are the people who end up being the ones who are trafficking these girls. I know that was a lot. I know I'm spitting a whole lot because there's just so much that I want to kind of share.
Seth, I've got like 15 minutes left, but I want to just get a few things. I've got so much to ask you. I could talk to you for days. So Seth, I was coming to my next question with regards to trafficking is clearly tied to crime networks, to cartel systems. That's a definite, because you're saying girls coming in as far as from Ukraine. I mean, that's clearly, it's people are displaced there, and they probably loaded them up. And with the kidnapping, is there a certain age barrier, or does it not matter? I mean, is it kids to adults, or there's no limit?
No, unfortunately, there's definitely not an age, that we have to look out for. But I will say that what we all growing up in America have been taught is we have to look after the little kids, because the little kids are the ones who are most likely and most vulnerable to a physical adult grabbing them, throwing them in a van and taking off. And they're the most susceptible to you being able to trick them, right? Outwit them. Hey, your mom sent me to come pick you up from school. Hop in. Most schools in large cities are obviously checking to make sure exactly who this child is going home with, but that's a huge minority when you look at across all of just America alone at the school systems. You're going home with whoever you're going. The school doesn't run that, right? And so we have that thought process. The downside is the amount of money that you're able to make on a human that you're able to traffic is so high, because the cocaine never runs out, the meth never runs out, right? When you think of moving cocaine, methamphetamine, all these products, you sell it one time, it goes away. And also, you have to bring in huge loads of it, and law enforcement's been zeroing in on that for so many years. It's so much more easy for a person dressed as a father and having a van full of kids looking like they're going on vacation, and of all ages. And so that's a big part of it, is the appetite. Unfortunately, the absolutely disgusting evil that's looking for every age now. They are looking for kids that are more well-developed, that are in their, 12, 13, 14, 15, that are now starting to look like an adult, but they're still underage. And so there is no age that your kid can't be taken. I sent you a clip, and it was of a guy who just does this on videos. He drives up in a brand new fill-in-the-blank car. It was a Camaro on this one. And he asked he says, hey, girls, I know your mom. She sent me to come pick you guys up. He's well-dressed. He speaks plain English. He's, semi-attractive. He's well-kept. And he's driving a brand new Camaro. These two girls, and I'm going to guess they were middle school or, freshmen in high school, somewhere around there. Oh, cool. Jump into a Camaro with this guy. He then starts driving, and he says, you know that I have no idea who your mother is, right? And the girl unbuckles her seatbelt. He's still driving. And he goes, why did you get in a car with a person who said, your mom? I didn't even say her name. And these girls are just flabbergasted. They have no idea. I've seen multiple versions of this. There was another one where they would do the same thing, but it was guys wearing ski masks that are waiting inside the van. Now, that's as traumatic as it can get. But the people in the ski masks were her parents. So they get grabbed and thrown into a van, and they see people in the back with ski masks coming at them, and they are freaking out. I'm sure they have PTSD after that, but guess what? Mom and dad take off their ski mask and are like, you literally walked over here and got in a van with this freaking creep. What were you thinking, right? And that kind of thing is, as a brand new father, my podcast, right? Old Army Ranger, old Ranger, new dad. I have a 2-year-old. And my wife is currently, 12 and a half, almost 13 weeks pregnant right now. And it is terrifying, the thought of having a daughter specifically, because they are the main, right? That is the main source of traffickers. But unfortunately, little boys are 100% trafficked, and it is way, way more prevalent than we think. Even when I was working with these hunters, the number of boys that they're getting now, the percentages are going up. It seems like each year, we were only there a couple of years, and it had risen by, probably, I think, between 5 and 10% on the boy side that they had identified. And that's, again, just anecdotal, one specific location, one specific area. But man, if that's happening everywhere, and you're looking at 25, maybe 30% of the children being trafficked are now going to boys. No child is safe, and you have to drill into your child's head that there has to be a password. And that's what I'm teaching my children. There is a password. If it is not me, if it is not your mother, and if it is not your grandmother, if they do not have a password, and it's going to be a password nobody else is going to have or think of, that child is not getting in that car with those people, and they need to immediately run to adults and notify them that someone just tried to abduct them, because that's what we're going to take every precaution. And that's what I would recommend every person. And I don't mean if your kid is 16 or 17, they're good now. 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds are getting abducted too. These girls that go to clubs, these girls that go to bars from colleges and just get hammered and walk home in the middle of the night. So many sad stories that I've talked to fellow law enforcement officers who have had to work those cases and are like, I mean, it's a ticking time bomb that everybody knows exists, and everybody's going to do it anyways. And so the cartels have obviously caught on to that, and that's going to get more and more prevalent. And one more, I do want to share one quick story specifically of law enforcement corruption and the cartel. This happened. I was in the oil fields. I used to live on oil rigs too in Oklahoma and Texas. And one of my buddies I was a police officer with him. He got out of law enforcement as well. And he lives down in Houston now. In Houston, he told me of this case. He said that they haven't put this out publicly, and it's only his buddies in law enforcement there that shared with him these details, because it was be such a absolute black eye to their departments down there. They will not ever put this information out. There were kids that started disappearing from high schools, multiple high schools, but very large high schools in Houston. Those kids were being taken, abducted, at parties, specifically at the parties. So we're all talking about high school kids, and we're all talking about girls that are 15, 16, most of them 16, 17, some sneak out early, but you're talking about that age range. These kids have not been found. They're nowhere to, they just disappear. One night they go to this party. They weren't supposed to be there. They were supposed to be there. It wasn't supposed to be a party. Then they are gone off the face of the earth. Then some operators start kicking in doors. They find these safe houses that these cartels are using, and they go in the basements, and all these kids are chained up. And they've been trafficking all these girls and all these boys. And it turns out they finally found out there were police officers who were plants, meaning they came from Mexico, or they were Americans who were getting paid by the cartel and took the money. And they were specifically the ones they put themselves in the position of school resource or in the area of these schools. Then they had kids who were in their early 20s or older that looked like they were freshmen in high school. They're tiny, young, skinny looking. And they brought them over, the cartel brought them over to plant them as high school students. And they then they happen to all of a sudden become these popular kids because they've got all the drugs. They're having these big, massive houses, and they're the ones throwing the house parties. So you've got cartel members as high school students throwing cartel parties unknowingly to these high school kids who are seeing this mansion, getting picked up in these crazy rides, go into these big houses full of weed, as much as you want to smoke, as much cocaine as you want to try for the first time, right? Just living the life. And then, whoop, boop, boop, getting disappear. But not a huge swath of them, just onesies and twosies. And the police officers who are investigating these mysteries of all these kids disappearing by these parents, yeah, they're also on the payrolls of the cartel. So that's going nowhere. They're not looking into anything. They're not actually calling anybody. And so it all came out finally that, yeah, this was this huge operation by the cartel. But again, what could you do? It's the cartel. They're across the river. They're in another country. What can we do about it? So, and American law, how updated are our laws to be able to charge somebody with faking as a high school student in order to commit or facilitate human trafficking? I doubt that's a law from the 1800s. That hasn't been thought of, right? And that's the other part that I learned as a police officer that terrified me was if somebody hasn't done it before so often that they had to all agree to make a law against it, that the law enforcement arm is essentially underprepared or completely essentially toothless when it comes to going after these people. You're not able to really put a bite at all. And too many people have been getting slaps on the wrist for committing horrific things like facilitating human trafficking, that they just laugh about it. And, unfortunately in the federal prison system, I was in there with a drug cartel leader. Come to find out, I didn't know he was an old man who had the Satan tattooed on the back of his skull, and no one talked to him. He just walked around, just an old random guy with Satan tattooed on the back of his skull, full size. And I was just like, it's kind of weird. Never thought about it. I check the mail. I haven't ever been trained, by the way. They don't even train you to do this. They just say, hey, check the mail. Do your best to, find hidden codes and decipher that on your own. So there's an investigative service, but again, they just let you do it. So I'm just looking through, and this guy finally has a letter. Never seen him send a letter out. I open it up, and it's a printout. It's a screenshot, essentially a printout of a massive, massive mansion that was found out to not even be lived in. It was, they had some random people living there to caretake the ground, but nobody lived there. All the walls were stacked with $100 and $20 bills. The whole house was a cash house. That's all it was. And that he literally joked with whoever he was sending this to that they finally got another one of his houses. That's when I finally figured out who this guy was. This guy was an absolute drug cartel leader who's now in the middle of Nowhereville where I'm working, and he's been there for a long time. Nobody talks to him, but I guarantee you he's running everything out of that prison. And he's not needing to do it through the mail. So if that's not enough food for thought, I know we're running late, but yeah, had to get as much of that out as I can, brother. Like I say, I've got stories for years because I've lived it for years, and having been in all these different forms of law enforcement and military, and just coming into contact, right? When you're a warrior, you automatically group up with those guys who want to take the fight to the enemy in every capacity, and so you just rub shoulders with so many people like Scott, Dottie Skipper, and people like that are putting on this fight that nobody, out here in the mainstream knows about, but everybody should know about.
Seth, we've just touched the surface of the amount of questions I have for you, but we have to do another, multiple podcasts on different
for sure
things. Seth, I just want to thank you for your courage, your honesty, for your unrelenting fight for those who can't speak for themselves. It's been a blessing to have you, and it's worrying, man. It's people that harm women and kids. Unfortunately, the justice system in the UK and globally doesn't do enough to these people. Could use a different language. Yeah,
they're more animal than human, for sure.
Yeah. So, guys, please follow, share, like, and subscribe. This is not just, it's not just informative, but it's a wake-up call for people that have kids, family, and everybody should pay attention to this type of stuff. So, Seth Ryan, thank you, brother. Blessings to you and your family. I really appreciate your time, and no doubt we will do more and another one. Probably just
awesome
part 2 on this topic. So,
yeah.
But stay safe. God bless to all. Thanks for listening, and all the best.
Same. God bless.
Hold on one second, please, brother. Let me stop that so I can